You think black mothers in the 1920s only knew how to fry chicken and bake cornbread? Think again. These women carried recipes from enslavement, Reconstruction, and the Great Migration, turning scraps into feasts and poverty into pride. Here are 30 lost recipes only 1920s black moms knew, dishes that fed families, built communities, and quietly disappeared from our tables.
Ashcake was once the bread of survival, baked directly in the hot ashes of wood-burning stoves when families had nothing else. Black mothers would mix cornmeal with water and salt, shape it into thick patties, and nestle them into the glowing coals. The cakes baked slowly, developing a dark, ash-covered crust that was brushed away to reveal tender, slightly smoky bread inside. The texture was dense and gritty, the flavor earthy and pure, nothing but corn and fire. Children ate ashcakes with molasses or potlikker, soaking up whatever liquid was available. In rural Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, ashcake appeared when wheat flour was impossible to afford. Mothers made them because they required no pans, no grease, and no oven, just cornmeal and heat. Though forgotten today, ashcake once stood as proof that survival required nothing more than fire, meal, and determination. Potlikker greens were more than side dishes. They were medicine, nourishment, and tradition simmered into one pot. Black mothers boiled collard, turnip, or mustard greens for hours with smoked meat, creating a dark, mineral-rich broth that pooled at the bottom. This broth, called potlikker, carried vitamins, iron, and the essence of everything cooked together. Children were given cupfuls to drink or used cornbread to soak up every drop, ensuring nothing was wasted. The greens themselves became tender and silky, flavored deeply by the pork. In the 1920s South, potlikker was considered healing, given to sick children, nursing mothers, and anyone who needed strength. Mothers knew the broth held more nutrition than the greens themselves, reheating it for days. Families drank it warm in the morning or poured it over bread. Potlikker greens represented the philosophy of using everything, wasting nothing. Today, the broth is often thrown away, but black mothers in the 1920s knew it was liquid gold. Cracklings were once treasured more than candy, made from rendering pork fat until crispy golden bits floated in pure lard. Black mothers would cut fatback or pork skin into small pieces and cook them slowly in cast-iron pots, stirring constantly as the fat melted away. The bits turned crispy, salty, and impossibly rich, eaten hot from the pot or saved for cornbread batter. Children begged for cracklings, and mothers portioned them carefully, knowing they provided essential calories and flavor. The rendered lard was saved for cooking everything from biscuits to vegetables. In 1920s black households, cracklings meant the hog had been butchered and winter provisions were secured. They were celebratory food tied to community hog killings where neighbors gathered. Mothers mixed cracklings into cornbread, creating pone studded with salty, crunchy bits. They stirred them into greens and packed them for lunches. Though still made in some communities, the art of rendering fat and saving every crackling has largely disappeared from modern kitchens. Hog head cheese was true nose-to-tail cooking, transforming the pig's head into a savory, jellied loaf that fed families for days. Black mothers boiled the entire head with onions, bay leaves, and spices until the meat fell from the bone and the broth thickened with natural gelatin. The meat was picked clean, chopped finely, and mixed back into the reduced broth before being poured into pans to set. Once chilled, the mixture solidified into a firm loaf that could be sliced and served cold or fried. The texture was unique, tender meat suspended in savory jelly, with flavors that were rich and deeply satisfying. In the 1920s, hog head cheese appeared at Sunday dinners, church gatherings, and special occasions, sliced thin and eaten with crackers or bread. Mothers made it because it used parts that would otherwise be discarded. The process took hours, but yielded protein that lasted through the week. Hog head cheese represented both skill and respect. Skill in transforming unusual cuts into something delicious, and respect for the animal that sustained the family. Butter beans cooked with ham bone were once a summer staple. made when gardens produced more beans than families could eat fresh. Black mothers shelled butter beans by hand, their fingers working quickly to free the large, creamy beans from their pods. The beans were simmered slowly with a ham bone or piece of fatback, creating a pot of tender, buttery legumes swimming in rich, smoky broth. The ham bone provided flavor and gelatin, thickening the potlikker into something silky and substantial. Families ate butter beans over rice with cornbread or straight from bowls. In Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia during the 1920s, butter beans meant summer abundance and the promise of preserved food for winter. Mothers dried any beans that couldn't be eaten fresh, storing them for months. Fresh butter beans were softer and sweeter than dried ones. The dish provided complete protein when combined with cornbread. Butter beans with ham bone represented agricultural knowledge, cooking skill, and the ability to transform garden produce into satisfying meals. Lye hominy was ancient food, made by soaking dried corn in lye water until the kernels swelled and their hulls loosened. Black mothers learned this process from indigenous peoples and African traditions, creating food that was more nutritious than regular corn. The process began with making lye from wood ashes, then soaking field corn for days until the kernels transformed into pale, ghostly white hominy. After rinsing away all traces of lye, the hominy was boiled until tender. The taste was earthy and slightly mineral, with a chewy texture that satisfied hunger like nothing else. In the 1920s, hominy appeared regularly on black tables because it turned cheap field corn into something substantial. Mothers fried hominy in bacon grease for breakfast, creating crispy cakes that children ate with molasses. They stewed it with meat for dinner. Lye hominy represented knowledge passed through generations, showing that food preparation was both science and art. The technique has mostly disappeared, replaced by canned hominy that lacks the texture of the hand-processed original. Rabbit haslet was thrifty cooking at its finest, using the organ meats from wild rabbits to create rich, savory gravy. Black mothers cleaned rabbit livers, hearts, and kidneys carefully, then chopped them finely and cooked them slowly with onions and seasonings. The organs released their richness into the gravy, creating something deeply flavorful that stretched to feed more people. Served over rice or biscuits, haslet was economical and nourishing, providing iron and protein from parts that might otherwise be discarded. In rural communities during the 1920s, rabbit hunting was common, and mothers knew how to use every part of the animal. The haslet was made immediately after cleaning the rabbit. Children might wrinkle their noses at first, but they learned to appreciate the rich mineral flavor from organ meats. The dish represented complete utilization and respect for the animal. Today, organ meat cooking has largely disappeared, but in the 1920s, Black mothers knew that wasting any part of food was unthinkable. Tomato gravy was summer in a skillet, made when gardens produced more tomatoes than families could preserve. Black mothers would cook fresh tomatoes down with bacon grease, flour, and seasonings until they formed a thick, tangy gravy that was poured over biscuits or bread. The acidity of the tomatoes balanced the richness of the grease, creating something both comforting and bright. The gravy was eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. In the 1920s South, tomato gravy meant the garden was producing and families could enjoy fresh vegetables while they lasted. Mothers made it quickly, starting with bacon grease left in the pan, adding flour to create a roux, then stirring in chopped fresh tomatoes. The mixture bubbled and thickened, filling kitchens with the smell of cooked tomatoes and pork. Children sopped it up with whatever bread was available. The dish represented seasonal eating and making the most of what grew abundantly. Today, with year-round access to tomatoes, the urgency and joy of tomato gravy has faded. Blackberry cobbler dumplings were different from modern cobblers, made by dropping biscuit dough directly into bubbling berry juice. Black mothers would cook wild blackberries with sugar until the fruit broke down and released its juices, then drop spoonfuls of thick biscuit dough into the hot liquid. The dumplings steamed and puffed, becoming tender inside while developing slightly crusty tops. The result was somewhere between dumpling and cobbler, with soft dough soaking up berry juice. In the 1920s, blackberry picking was a summer ritual, with children gathering berries from wild patches and returning home with stained fingers. Mothers made cobbler dumplings because they required less flour than traditional cobbler, stretching resources while still creating something special. The dessert was eaten warm, sometimes with cream or milk poured over. It represented the brief window of berry season and the joy of turning foraged fruit into celebration. The technique has been replaced by easier cobbler methods, but the original dumpling version had a texture and character all its own. Neckbone stew was Sunday dinner in many Black households, made by simmering pork neck bones until the meat fell tender and the broth turned rich. Black mothers would brown the bones first to develop flavor, then cover them with water and cook slowly with onions, garlic, and whatever vegetables were available. The bones released gelatin and marrow, creating a thick, nourishing broth. The meat, though tough when raw, became soft and pull-apart tender after hours of cooking. Families ate neckbone stew over rice, with bread or straight from bowls, sucking the marrow from bones. In the 1920s, neckbones were among the cheapest cuts available, often given away or sold for pennies. Black mothers transformed these discarded bones into meals that sustained families through the week. The stew improved with time, becoming even richer as it sat. The dish represented alchemy, turning bones into nourishment through patience and knowledge. Today, neck bones remain popular in some communities, but the technique of slow cooking them into rich stew has been lost to many. Fried apple pies were pocket-sized treasures made by filling half-moon pastries with spiced dried apples and frying them until golden. Black mothers dried apples in late summer, preserving the harvest for winter baking. When time came to make pies, the dried apples were reconstituted with water, sugar, and spices, cooked into a thick filling that wouldn't leak. The pastry was rolled thin, cut into circles, filled, and sealed carefully before being dropped into hot grease. The pies emerged crispy on the outside with a filling that was concentrated apple flavor, tart, sweet, and spiced. In the 1920s, fried pies were special occasion food, made for church socials, picnics, and celebrations. Mothers fried them in large batches, the smell filling entire houses. The pies were portable, needing no plates or utensils, making them perfect for packed lunches. They represented resourcefulness, showing how dried fruit could be transformed into something that felt luxurious. The technique has mostly disappeared in favor of baked pies, but fried pies had a special texture and flavor that made them unforgettable. Souse meat was another form of head cheese made by boiling pig parts with vinegar and spices until they formed a pickled, jellied loaf. Black mothers included ears, snouts, and other trimmings, creating a dish that was tangy, savory, and uniquely flavored. The vinegar preserved the meat while adding bright acidity that balanced the richness. Once cooled and set, souse was sliced thin and eaten cold, often with crackers or bread. The texture was firm but tender, with visible pieces of meat suspended in clear jelly. In the 1920s, souse appeared at gatherings and celebrations, considered a delicacy that showed cooking skill. Mothers made it after hog killings, using parts that couldn't be cured or made into sausage. The preparation took time and attention, requiring careful cleaning and precise seasoning. The result was something that lasted without refrigeration, making it valuable for families without iceboxes. Souse represented preservation knowledge and the ability to transform unusual ingredients into something genuinely tasty. Today, souse has become rare, remembered only in communities that maintain traditional foodways. Kidney stew was organ meat cooking at its richest, made by slowly braising pork or beef kidneys until tender and flavorful. Black mothers soaked the kidneys in milk or vinegar to remove any strong flavors, then sliced them and cooked them slowly with onions and gravy. The resulting stew was dark, savory, and intensely meaty, providing iron and protein that growing families needed. The kidneys had a unique texture, tender but slightly firm, and a flavor that was rich and mineral. Served over rice or with bread, kidney stew was filling and economical. In the 1920s, organ meats were common because they cost less than muscle meat but provided equal nutrition. Mothers knew that kidneys, properly prepared, were delicious rather than desperate food. The soaking process removed any unpleasant flavors, and slow cooking made them tender. Children who grew up eating kidney stew didn't find it strange. It was simply dinner. The dish represented nose-to-tail eating before it became a culinary trend. Kidney stew has largely disappeared as organ meats fell out of favor, but it once provided essential nourishment to Black families. Sweet potato pone was dense, spiced, and deeply satisfying, made by grating raw sweet potatoes and mixing them with molasses, spices, and just enough flour to bind. Black mothers baked pone in cast-iron pans, creating a dessert that was somewhere between pudding and cake. The texture was moist and heavy, with grated potato creating structure and natural sweetness. Molasses added depth and color, while spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger provided warmth. The result was dark, sticky, and incredibly filling. In the 1920s, sweet potato pone appeared regularly because sweet potatoes were easy to grow and store through winter. Mothers made pone for Sunday desserts, church gatherings, and special occasions. It required minimal ingredients and could be made year-round from stored potatoes. The dessert represented agricultural abundance and the ability to create sweetness from garden produce. Children loved pone's dense texture and deep molasses flavor. The dish was never light or delicate. It was substantial and earthy. Sweet potato pone has been overshadowed by sweet potato pie, but the original pone had a character all its own. Oxtail pepper pot was Caribbean influence meeting Southern foodways, made by braising oxtails with peppers and tomatoes until the meat fell from the bone. Black mothers who migrated from the Caribbean to Southern cities brought this tradition, introducing a dish that was rich, spicy, and intensely flavorful. The oxtails released gelatin as they cooked, thickening the stew into something luxurious. Hot peppers provided heat, while tomatoes added acidity and body. The result was a stew that was complex and satisfying, eaten over rice or with bread. In the 1920s, oxtails were cheap cuts that required long cooking but rewarded patience with incredible flavor. Mothers made pepper pot for special occasions, knowing the dish took hours. The meat became so tender it melted on the tongue, and the broth was rich enough to satisfy completely. The dish represented cultural exchange and adaptation, showing how recipes traveled with people and evolved in new places. Oxtail pepper pot has survived in some communities, but the connection to its 1920s origins has been lost for many. Egg custard pie was simple elegance, made from eggs, milk, sugar, and nutmeg baked into a tender filling. Black mothers made this pie when eggs were plentiful and when they wanted something that felt special without requiring expensive ingredients. The custard was silky and barely sweet, letting the egg's richness shine through. Nutmeg provided warm spice, and the crust added flaky contrast. The pie was served at room temperature or chilled, sliced thin because its richness meant a little went far. In the 1920s, egg custard pie appeared at church suppers, family gatherings, and Sunday dinners, representing refinement within reach. Mothers beat the eggs carefully, tempering them with hot milk to prevent curdling, and baked the pie slowly until just set. The result was smooth and trembling, with a texture that was almost fragile. Children loved egg custard pie because it tasted like sweetened eggs with none of the complexity that made some desserts challenging. Today, egg custard pie has been overshadowed by cream pies and chocolate desserts, but it once stood as proof that simplicity could be sophisticated. Peanut brittle candy was Christmas treat and celebration sweet, made by cooking peanuts in boiling sugar syrup until it reached hard crack stage. Black mothers made brittle during holidays, spreading the hot candy thin on buttered pans and breaking it into pieces once cooled. The candy was crunchy, sweet, and nutty, requiring careful attention to prevent burning. The process was dangerous. Boiling sugar could cause terrible burns, but the result was worth the risk. Brittle lasted for weeks without spoiling, making it perfect for gift-giving and special occasions. In the 1920s, peanuts were plentiful in southern states, and making peanut brittle was a way to create candy when store-bought sweets were impossible to afford. Mothers made large batches, portioning them into tins for neighbors, church members, and family. Children watched the process with fascination and fear, understanding that the bubbling sugar was too dangerous to touch. The candy represented skill with sugar work and the ability to create luxury from simple ingredients. Peanut brittle has survived in commercial form, but homemade versions made by Black mothers in the 1920s had a character that mass-produced candy could never match. Boiled peanuts in shell were Southern tradition that provided portable protein and social food for gatherings. Black mothers would boil raw peanuts in heavily salted water for hours until the shells softened and the nuts inside became tender and creamy. The peanuts were eaten warm, cracked open one at a time, with the salty, briny flavor and soft texture making them almost addictive. They appeared at fish fries, church gatherings, and community events, served in bowls where people could grab handfuls. In the 1920s, peanuts were easy to grow and store, making them accessible protein that required no refrigeration. Mothers boiled peanuts during harvest season, creating food that was simultaneously snack and sustenance. The process was simple but time-consuming, requiring hours of simmering. Children loved cracking the shells and eating the warm nuts inside, often consuming dozens at a sitting. Boiled peanuts represented agricultural abundance and the transformation of simple ingredients through patient cooking. The tradition survives in some southern areas, but the connection to its role as survival food and community builder has been forgotten by many. Persimmon pudding was fall dessert made when wild persimmons ripened and fell from trees, providing free sweetness. Black mothers would gather persimmons after the first frost when they became soft and sugar-sweet. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp that formed the base of the pudding. Mixed with eggs, milk, sugar, and spices, the persimmon pulp baked into a dense, dark dessert that tasted like autumn concentrated. The texture was somewhere between pudding and cake, moist and heavy with fruit. In the 1920s, persimmon pudding appeared during the brief window when wild fruit was available, marking the season's change. Mothers made it because persimmons were free and because the dessert required few additional ingredients. The flavor was unique, sweet with slight astringency, earthy and complex. Children looked forward to persimmon season, knowing that pudding meant fall had arrived. The dessert represented foraging knowledge and the ability to transform wild foods into celebration. Today, persimmon pudding has become rare as wild trees have been removed and commercial varieties have replaced native fruits. The original pudding made from foraged persimmons had a character that cultivated varieties cannot replicate. Pickled pig feet were preservation and delicacy combined, made by boiling pig feet until tender, then covering them with spiced vinegar. Black mothers prepared pig feet immediately after hog killing, ensuring nothing was wasted. The feet were scrubbed thoroughly, boiled until the meat was tender and the skin gelatinous, then packed into crocks with hot vinegar, bay leaves, and pepper. After weeks of curing, the pig feet emerged transformed, tangy, rich, and deeply flavored. They were eaten cold, the meat pulling easily from bones, the skin silky and satisfying. In the 1920s, pickled pig feet appeared at celebrations and gatherings, considered special food that showed cooking skill. Mothers made them because they used parts that might otherwise be discarded and because the pickling preserved them for months without refrigeration. The flavor was assertive, vinegary, porky, and slightly sweet, requiring an acquired taste that children developed over time. Pickled pig feet represented nose-to-tail eating and the principle that every part of the animal deserved respect and use. The dish survives in some communities, but its role as preservation necessity has been forgotten. Corn pudding was summer comfort, made when fresh corn was abundant and families wanted something richer than boiled ears. Black mothers cut corn from cobs, scraping to get the milky liquid that would thicken the pudding naturally. The corn was mixed with eggs, milk, sugar, and butter, then baked until set. The result was sweet, creamy, and full of corn flavor, somewhere between side dish and dessert. The texture was soft and spoonable, with whole kernels throughout and a slightly browned top. In the 1920s, corn pudding appeared at Sunday dinners and special meals, showing that the garden was producing and the family could enjoy fresh vegetables. Mothers made it because it stretched fresh corn into something substantial, feeding more people than eating the ears alone would. The pudding was eaten warm, often alongside savory dishes despite its sweetness. Children loved corn pudding because it tasted almost like dessert, but was served at dinner. The dish represented agricultural abundance and the joy of eating seasonally when gardens overflowed. Corn pudding has survived in some form, but the version made from hand-cut fresh corn by the 1920s, mothers had a sweetness and texture that frozen corn cannot match. Salmon croquettes were Friday fish made from canned salmon, mixed with cornmeal, and fried until golden. Black mothers drained canned salmon, picked through it for bones, though they often left the soft bones in for calcium, and mixed it with cornmeal, eggs, and seasonings. The mixture was shaped into patties and fried in grease until crispy outside and tender inside. The croquettes were savory, slightly fishy, and incredibly filling, providing protein when fresh fish was unavailable or unaffordable. In the 1920s, canned salmon was shelf-stable and economical, making it accessible to families who lived far from water. Mothers made salmon croquettes for Friday dinners, following Catholic fish traditions or simply choosing affordable protein. The croquettes could be eaten hot or cold, with hot sauce or plain, making them versatile and family-friendly. Children sometimes complained about the fish flavor, but they ate them because dinner was dinner. The dish represented adaptation and making use of modern preserved foods while maintaining traditional foodways. Salmon croquettes have survived in many Black households, remaining popular even as other 1920s dishes have disappeared. The connection to their role as economic necessity has faded, but the recipe endures. Sugarcane chewing was field treat and playground entertainment, made by cutting fresh sugarcane into sections for children to gnaw. Black mothers who lived near sugarcane fields would obtain stalks, peel away the hard outer layer, and cut the sweet inner core into manageable pieces. Children chewed the fibrous cane, extracting sweet juice and spitting out the pulp. The process was messy and took time, but it provided natural sweetness and entertainment. In the 1920s South, sugarcane chewing was common among Black children, especially during harvest season when cane was plentiful. Mothers gave children cane pieces as treats, rewards, or distraction during long days. The juice was intensely sweet, coating teeth and tongues with sticky sugar. Children would chew for hours, competing to see who could extract the most juice. Sugarcane chewing represented agricultural access and the pleasure of eating directly from the source. The practice has largely disappeared as sugarcane farming changed and as concerns about dental health increased. Those who remember chewing sugarcane recall it with nostalgia, remembering the sweetness and the social aspects of sharing cane with friends. Fatback and molasses was breakfast combination that provided energy for heavy labor, pairing salty pork fat with sweet molasses. Black mothers would fry thick slices of fatback until the edges crisped and the fat rendered clear and hot. The crispy fatback was eaten with bread or biscuits, often with molasses drizzled over or alongside for dipping. The combination of intense salt and deep sweetness created something satisfying and sustaining. The fat provided calories essential for farm work, while molasses offered quick energy and iron. In the 1920s, fatback and molasses appeared on breakfast tables throughout the rural South, fueling families through long days of physical labor. Mothers served it because both ingredients were affordable and shelf-stable, and because the combination provided maximum energy at minimum cost. Children might resist the salty fat initially, but they learned that it kept hunger away through morning work. The meal represented survival eating, choosing foods not for pleasure but for the fuel they provided. Fatback and molasses has disappeared as diets changed and understanding of nutrition evolved, but it once sustained countless Black families through poverty and hard work. Syllabub was Christmas luxury, made by whipping cream with wine or cider until it formed soft, boozy foam. Black mothers who worked in white households often learned Syllabub recipes and adapted them for their own celebrations. The dessert required cream, which was expensive, making it truly special occasion food. The mixture was sweetened with sugar, flavored with lemon or nutmeg, and whipped by hand until light and airy. The result was delicate, sweet, and slightly alcoholic, a treat that felt sophisticated and rare. In the 1920s, Syllabub appeared at Christmas, weddings, and the most important celebrations, showing that the family could afford luxury. Mothers made it carefully, whipping until their arms ached, creating something beautiful from simple ingredients. The dessert was served in glasses or cups, eaten with spoons, and savored slowly. Children were given small tastes, understanding that Syllabub was adult food, special and precious. The dish represented celebration and the desire to create elegance even in poverty. Syllabub has mostly disappeared, remembered only in historical cookbooks and Southern food scholarship, but it once graced the most important celebrations in Black homes. Stack cake layers were community wedding cakes, built from multiple thin layers contributed by guests and assembled by the bride's family. Black mothers would bake simple cake layers flavored with spices, bring them to weddings, and watch as they were stacked with apple butter or preserves between each layer. The resulting cake was tall, impressive, and represented community support for the new couple. Each layer was slightly different, reflecting the baker's particular recipe and skill. The filling soaked into the layers over days, creating a cake that improved with age. In the 1920s, stack cakes appeared at weddings and important gatherings, showing that the community valued the event enough to contribute. Mothers took pride in their layers, ensuring they were properly baked and flavorful. The cake was cut and served days after the wedding, once the layers had softened and melded. Children loved stack cake because it was spiced and sweet, with apple butter creating moist richness throughout. The tradition represented communal celebration and the understanding that important events required everyone's participation. Stack cake traditions have mostly disappeared as wedding cakes became commercialized, but they once stood as edible symbols of community bonds. Collard greens with potlikker was a dish where nothing went to waste and flavor reigned supreme. Collard greens were simmered for hours with smoked pork or turkey, allowing their sturdy leaves to soften and absorb the rich, savory essence of the meat. The resulting broth, known as potlikker, was a nutrient-packed liquid treasured as much as the greens themselves. Served with cornbread for dipping, it was both meal and sustenance, especially in lean times. In African American cooking, this was more than just a side. It was a way to nourish the body fully, drawing on traditions of resourcefulness passed down through generations. Potlikker was even believed to have restorative qualities, making it a home remedy as well as a culinary staple. The flavor was deep, smoky, and satisfying, with the greens offering a balance of bitterness and earthiness. While collard greens remain a symbol of Southern cooking, the reverence for potlikker has faded, leaving behind a tradition worth remembering for its taste and history alike. Lends flair to potlucks and bake sales, filling kitchens with the warm perfume of brown sugar and butter. A buttery shortbread crust was pressed into a pan and baked until just firm before being topped with a gooey mixture of chopped pecans, cream, and dark brown sugar. As it baked again, the topping bubbled into a caramel-like layer that set into chewy sweetness with a hint of nutty crunch. Each square delivered the flavor of classic Southern pralines in an easy-to-share form, perfect for coffee hours and church gatherings. Children loved licking the sticky syrup from their fingers, while adults reached for second and third pieces without apology. In the 1970s, these bars offered a bridge between candy making and home baking, capturing the indulgent spirit of Louisiana without the need for a candy thermometer. Pecan praline bars proved that a little Southern magic and a handful of pecans could turn an ordinary afternoon into a festival of sweetness worth every bite. Butter pecan ice cream was the homemade reward for hot summer. Wild muscadine grape jam brought the late summer woods to the breakfast table in a deep purple shine. Children and parents walked along fence lines and wooded edges with baskets in hand, searching for the thick-skinned grapes that thrived in southern heat. Once gathered, the fruit was boiled gently until the skins burst and the pulp softened, filling kitchens with a fragrance that hinted at honey and earth. The juice was strained and mixed with sugar, then cooked again until it thickened into a jam rich enough to spread over biscuits or stir into morning porridge. Families prized each jar, knowing that muscadines grew wild and free, needing only careful hands and patience to become something sweet. In some towns, church groups organized picking days, turning the harvest into a social event where songs and laughter echoed through the vines. Today, supermarket grapes have replaced the wild hunt, and store-bought jams lack the musky depth of fruit ripened under southern sun, but memories of purple-stained fingers still linger in many hearts. Stewed chicken backs were one of those meals that turned scraps into sustenance. In the 1960s, the back of the chicken was considered the cheapest cut, with little meat clinging to the bones. My grandmother bought them in bulk, cleaned them, and simmered them for hours with onions, potatoes, and carrots until the broth grew rich and fragrant. The long cooking softened the bits of meat so they slid easily from the bones, creating a meal that was both filling and flavorful. Families served the stew over rice or with cornbread, stretching the broth even further. The dish carried smoky undertones if she added a ham bone or a splash of fatback, but it was nourishing even without extras. What made it memorable was how something so overlooked could still feel satisfying and dignified at the table. Stewed chicken backs reminded families that nothing should be wasted, and even the smallest scraps could anchor a full dinner. It was a meal of patience, thrift, and creativity, proof that the cheapest part of the bird could still feed a household with warmth and pride. Pine needle tea offered a bright and restorative drink when fresh produce was scarce during cold months. Enslaved foragers collected the youngest green needles from longleaf and loblolly pines, rinsed them carefully, and steeped them in hot water until the brew released a light citrus aroma. Rich in vitamin C, this tea helped ward off scurvy and brought a welcome freshness to winter diets heavy with salt-preserved foods. The practice echoed both indigenous traditions and West African herbal knowledge, merging two continents' wisdom into a single sustaining cup. Families continued to brew pine needle tea well after emancipation, and it remains popular among modern herbalists for its gentle flavor and reputed immune-boosting qualities. Its evergreen scent and warm golden color remind us that even in the most barren season, the forest offered nourishment. Pine needle tea illustrates how observing the land and respecting its cycles allowed people to find both medicine and comfort, turning what others overlooked into a sustaining daily ritual that strengthened body and spirit alike. Batter-fried catfish was a highlight of southern fish fries, where friends and family gathered for food, music, and conversation. Fresh-caught catfish from rivers or ponds were cleaned, filleted, and coated in a seasoned cornmeal batter before being dropped into hot oil. The result was a golden, crispy crust giving way to tender, mild-tasting fish. Often served with coleslaw, hush puppies, and tartar sauce, it was a meal that celebrated both the bounty of local waters and the joy of community. In African American culture, fish fries were more than a way to eat. They were social events that strengthened ties and offered a space for laughter and storytelling. Batter-fried catfish was a centerpiece of these gatherings, appreciated for its satisfying crunch and comforting flavor. While farm-raised catfish has made the fish more widely available, the traditional preparation and community-centered events around it have become less frequent. For those who experienced them, the memory of hot, crispy catfish eaten outdoors among friends remains a cherished part of culinary history. Dramatic color and smooth tang to every celebration during the 1970s. The batter, tinted with just enough cocoa and a splash of red food coloring, baked into striking crimson layers that contrasted beautifully with the snowy frosting. Cream cheese whipped with butter and powdered sugar provided a silky finish that balanced the cake's subtle chocolate flavor with gentle tang. Each slice looked like a piece of art on a plate, making it a favorite for church anniversaries, wedding receptions, and holiday feasts. The recipe's origins carried whispers of both Southern tradition and a growing national fascination with bold presentation. Serving red velvet cake was a statement of style and hospitality, a way to show guests that a little extra effort could create something unforgettable. Families treasured the excitement it brought to the dessert table, proving that a dash of color and a touch of cream cheese could transform a simple cake into an icon of joy and celebration. Coconut sheet cake was the Maypop fruit mash, turned the wild passion fruit of the American South into a rare dessert filled with tropical fragrance.
Known as maypop for the sound of its hollow fruit when stepped on, this native vine produced aromatic yellow fruits that ripened in late summer. Enslaved foragers gathered the fruit, split the rinds, and scooped the bright pulp into a bowl with a drizzle of molasses or honey when such sweeteners were at hand. The result was a naturally tangy treat that needed no cooking and provided a burst of vitamins. The flavor, a cross between citrus and melon, delighted anyone lucky enough to taste it. Even after emancipation, rural families prized maypops for jellies and pies, and the plant remains a cherished wild edible across the Southeast. Maypop fruit mash preserves a memory of fleeting seasonal abundance and the creativity that transformed wild gifts into moments of celebration, proving that even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to enjoy the bright, unique flavors offered freely by the natural world. Homemade chow chow relish added brightness and crunch to plates crowded with greens, beans, and smoked meats. Cabbage, onions, peppers, and green tomatoes were chopped fine and simmered with vinegar, mustard seed, and sugar until they formed a tangy condiment that could last through winter. Every household had a slightly different recipe, some sweeter, some hotter, each a reflection of the cook's own hand. The relish brought sharp contrast to rich dishes like pork shoulder or pinto beans, cutting through heaviness with a lively bite. In late summer, neighbors gathered to chop vegetables together, sharing stories as big pots bubbled on outdoor fires. Jars lined pantry shelves in rows of glowing gold and green, a promise of flavor when fresh produce was long gone. Over time, store-bought pickles and bottled sauces replaced the careful preparation of chow chow, but its memory endures wherever families recall the sound of knives on wooden boards and the reward of a bright spoonful alongside a hearty meal. Pork crackling cornbread was a dish that made even a simple pan of bread feel like a celebration. Cracklings, small crispy bits left from rendering pork fat, were cheap to come by and packed with flavor. My grandmother folded them into cornbread batter, the fat melting and the crunchy pieces scattering through every slice. Baked until golden, it came out hearty and rich, with texture that plain cornbread never had. The salty pork balanced the sweet cornmeal, making each bite feel indulgent even though the ingredients were inexpensive. Families sliced it thick and ate it alone or alongside beans, greens, or stews, letting the cracklings carry the flavor of meat through the whole meal. In the 1960s, this kind of dish made families feel proud, as though they had something special on the table despite the hardships around them. Pork crackling cornbread was thrift turned into joy, simple food lifted by the spirit of making do. Buttermilk cornbread baked in cast iron anchored countless suppers with its golden crust and tangy bite. The heavy skillet, seasoned from years of use, gave the bread a flavor impossible to match in a modern pan. Families stirred cornmeal with fresh buttermilk, a little lard, and a pinch of salt, then listened for the satisfying hiss as the batter hit hot iron. The result was a loaf both crisp at the edges and tender inside, perfect for soaking up potlikker from simmered greens or for eating plain with a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandmothers often taught their grandchildren to test the heat of the skillet by flicking in a few drops of water, a small ritual that connected generations. On Sundays after church, the scent of baking cornbread drifted through neighborhoods, promising a meal that united family and friends. Today, prepackaged mixes and quick breads have replaced the slow, careful method that once defined African American kitchens, and the art of true cast iron cornbread grows rarer with each passing year. Cane top syrup began with the earliest shoots of sugarcane, long before the full harvest. When planters reserved the mature stalks for commercial sugar, enslaved workers cut the tender tops and simmered them slowly, extracting a thin but sweet syrup. This homemade sweetener flavored cornbread, porridge, and hot drinks, adding a rare touch of luxury to daily meals. The technique reflected both African experience with cane and Caribbean methods of small batch syrup making. After emancipation, many rural families continued to boil cane juice into syrup during the early season, a practice still alive in parts of Louisiana and Florida. The flavor is lighter and grassier than late-season molasses, making it unique among Southern sweeteners. Cane top syrup shows how skilled hands transformed what might have been discarded into something valuable, blending cultural knowledge with the natural rhythms of the crop. It stands as a reminder that, even in conditions of deprivation, African American cooks created enduring regional flavors that remain treasured in Southern pantries today. Which lost recipe from the 1920s would you bring back to your kitchen? Drop your answer in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to keep these forgotten flavors alive.